Welcome back, riders. Today, we're not just going on a ride through the streets, we're going on a ride through time.
Have you ever heard of John Titor? He was this mysterious person who popped up on the internet in the year 2000, saying he was a time traveler from the year 2036. He claimed he traveled back to get an old IBM computer, but along the way, he started leaving warnings about the future. Some people thought he was a joke. Others believed every word. The weird thing is, a lot of what he said feels like it's happening around us now. So on this ride, we're gonna explore his story, read some of his posts, and see how they connect to today and maybe even tomorrow. Buckle up, because this one's a trip. Let's roll back to the year 2000. The internet was still kind of new. No smartphones, no TikTok, no YouTube the way we know it now. People were hanging out on forums, typing in plain text, just talking with strangers. And out of nowhere, a user named timetravel_0 shows up. At first, nobody paid much attention. He said he was a soldier from the year 2036, sent back in time on a government mission. His job, to grab an old computer, the IBM 5100, built in 1975. Now that might sound random, but he explained it was needed in the future to debug old computer programs. Kind of like how your car sometimes needs a rare old part you can't find anymore. And here's the creepy part. Years later, computer experts confirmed the IBM 5100 actually did have hidden functions that most people didn't know about at that time. So either John Titor really knew his stuff, or he somehow guessed something only insiders were aware of. But John didn't stop there. He started describing his time machine in incredible detail. He said it was built by General Electric in the future. And he even posted diagrams showing parts like microsingularities, tiny black holes that bent time. And get this, he said his time machine was small enough to fit inside a 1967 Chevy Corvette convertible, though at the time he was driving around with it in a 1967 Chevy truck. Imagine that, just cruising the highways with a full-on time machine in the back seat. Makes my bike feel a little small time compared to that. His post went beyond just tech talk. He answered people's questions about the future. He claimed he'd already met his younger self. He warned people to stockpile food and supplies. He even hinted that his own timeline had gone through disasters we couldn't imagine. Some people thought it was the most detailed sci-fi roleplay they'd ever seen. But others, they started to wonder, what if this guy was telling the truth? Because his warnings weren't just science fiction. He talked about wars. He talked about America breaking apart. He talked about how technology would start controlling us more than we control it. And then, in March 2001, he was gone. No more posts. No goodbye. Just silence. That's part of what makes John Titor so haunting. He appeared suddenly. He spilled out his story in pieces. Then he vanished back into the digital shadows, kind of like a ghost rider through the internet. Titor's most famous and probably most frightening prediction was about a second American Civil War. On the forums, people asked him about the future of the United States. He didn't sugarcoat it. In fact, he was blunt. He said, "The conflict will start with civil unrest around the year 2004. It gets worse year by year. By 2012, the country is in full civil war. The fighting lasts until 2015. He explained that the unrest would begin with protests, street violence, and what he called a Waco every month, a reference to the Waco standoff in the 1990s, where government forces clashed with civilians. Titor said it would start small with skirmishes and uprisings, but by the 2010s, the US would be split wide open. Now, obviously, in our timeline, there wasn't a full-blown civil war by 2012. But pause for a second. Look at what we're living through today. Political polarization like never before. Families divided over beliefs. Protests filling the streets. Anger spilling onto social media. In some ways, it feels like maybe his timeline was early, or maybe we dodged the worst of it and we're living in a softer version of his warning. Titor also described what America looked like after the war. He said the country was split into 5 different regions, each with its own leadership. Washington, D.C., he said, was nuked and no longer the capital. Instead, the new U.S. capital in his timeline was in Omaha, Nebraska. Think about that. Not New York, not D.C., not Los Angeles. Omaha. right in the middle of the country. And in his posts, he even described how people lived day to day. He said big cities were dangerous, so most survivors moved into smaller rural communities. Farming was the main way people survived, and communities stuck together tightly. He made it sound like the U.S. turned into something closer to the Old West, tight-knit towns, very little trust in big government. Here's another one of his quotes. The year 2008 was a general date when everyone realized the world they were living in was over. The Civil War was as much about order and rights as it was about territory and politics. If you stop and think about it, doesn't that echo what we see now? People arguing over what's fair, what's right, what's real, what's fake. City against countryside, left against right. Every election feels like it could tip the balance. Some people say maybe Titor wasn't describing a literal battlefield civil war, but more of a social and cultural one. And if that's the case, then we might already be living in it. Not with tanks rolling down the street, but with information wars online, neighbors at each other's throats, and families splitting over politics at the dinner table. And here's the spooky part. When you're out riding, like I am now, you can see it in the smallest details. Flags on houses, stickers on cars, signs in yards. Every street tells a story about where people stand and how divided things have become. It makes me wonder, maybe John Titor wasn't completely wrong. Maybe his timeline didn't match ours exactly. But maybe his warning was that division left unchecked could tear apart a country. Whether it happens with bullets or with words, division is division. And that's something we're feeling every single day. So when I look around while writing, I have to ask, are we seeing the early signs of what Titor warned us about? Or are we just imagining shadows because of the mystery? Either way, his Civil War prediction still hits a little too close to home. Titor didn't just warn about division in America. He also painted a terrifying picture of what was happening in the rest of the world. In his posts, he wrote that a global war broke out around 2015. He claimed it was so destructive that it killed nearly 3 billion people worldwide. Imagine that, almost half the planet gone. And he was specific about how it started. According to him, the war in my time was between Russia, China, and America. nuclear weapons were used, many cities in the United States were destroyed. That's the kind of prediction that makes you sit up and think. Because even though we didn't see a massive nuclear war in 2015, the ingredients he talked about, they're all still here. He said Russia would rise again, stronger than people expected. And look around today. Russia is right at the center of global conflict. He mentioned the Middle East being unstable, and we're still seeing that play out in ways that affect the entire world. He even described how World War III went down. In 2015, Russia launches a nuclear strike against major cities in the United States, China, and Europe. The US counterattacks. The war lasts for about 3 years. It ends in 2017 with the United States on the winning side, but at a terrible cost. Nukes, millions gone, cities wiped off the map. Now, if you're thinking, okay, but that didn't happen, you're right. But here's the eerie part. So many people today are worried that the next world war could look exactly like what he described. Nuclear threats are in the news again. Countries are testing weapons. We've got AI built into military systems. And just because it didn't happen on his timeline doesn't mean it couldn't still happen on ours. Another thing he said really stuck with me. You don't realize how close you are to self-destruction. The weapons you build will one day be used. That one gives me chills because it's true. We humans don't invent weapons just to keep them in storage. History shows that if a weapon exists, eventually it gets used. Now think about this while I'm writing. Every mile marker, every bridge, every town we pass through in his timeline, some of these would have been gone. Just dust and rubble. Entire cities vanished in seconds. And here's the part that keeps people hooked on his story. He didn't describe it like a faraway nightmare. He described it like something he lived through, like he'd seen friends and family die. He said survivors became hardened, communities got smaller, and the idea of global travel or big international trade basically disappeared. So even though we didn't get Titor's World War III in 2015, the world we're in today still feels like it's inching towards something big. You can feel it in the news. You can see it in the way nations treat each other. The question is, are we watching his warning slowly come true, just on a delayed schedule? Titor didn't just warn about wars and fighting. He also dropped some heavy warnings about technology. And honestly, this one feels the most real today. He wrote things like, The biggest problem you'll face in the future is not war. It's how you gave away your freedom without even noticing. Think about that for a second. He said people wouldn't lose their privacy all at once. They'd give it up piece by piece, slowly. And instead of fighting against it, they choose it because it was convenient. That doesn't sound like some far off 2036 world. That sounds exactly like right now. We carry smartphones that track our location 24/7. Every website we visit, every product we buy, even the words we speak near a device, they're logged somewhere. Titor said governments and big corporations would use this data to know everything about us. And here we are. Our faces are scanned at airports. Our cars track our routes. And even doorbell cameras record our every move on the street. Here's another quote from him. You should be less concerned with the wars of men and more concerned with the wars of information. The tools you build will be used to watch you. Creepy, right? Because today, the real battles are over information. Who controls it? Who censors it? Who profits from it? We live in an age where news spreads in seconds. But at the same time, stories can be erased or hidden just as quickly. And here's something else. He claimed that in his world, people eventually learned to live without giving away their information so freely. He said communities in 2036 were smaller, more private, more guarded. But our present feels like the total opposite. We post every detail of our lives online. We check in at restaurants. We share photos of our houses, our cars, our kids. Titor would probably shake his head at how wide open we've left the door. So, as I am writing right now, look around. Cameras on streetlights, ads on billboards that feel like they're reading our mind. People walking around, staring at their phones instead of noticing the world around them. That's exactly what he was warning about. And he didn't just stop at surveillance. He hinted that the tech we create to make life easier would eventually make us weaker. In one of his posts, he suggested that relying too much on machines would make people forget how to think for themselves. Let me ask you, how many phone numbers do you have memorized today? Probably just one or two, right? Back in the day, people knew 20 off the top of their head. How many people can read a map today without GPS? Or fix something without Googling it? Titor predicted that kind of dependency would become dangerous. Here's the kicker. He said that in his timeline, There came a point where technology wasn't just a tool, it was a leash. And people had to fight to break free from it. Now, maybe that sounds dramatic, but if you've ever had that eerie feeling your phone is listening to you, or you've gotten an ad for something you only mentioned out loud once, well, then you know why this is part of Titor's story. It feels less that science fiction and more like right now. So, was he warning us about 2036? Or was he just describing the world that we're already living in today? One of the most mind-bending things John Titor ever said wasn't about wars or technology. It was about time itself. He explained that the future isn't a single path. He claimed there are many timelines, like branches of a tree. Every choice, every action, every tiny decision creates a new branch. And when he traveled back to the year 2000, he wasn't landing in the exact version of his past. He was landing in a close copy of it. That means his predictions weren't meant to match our world perfectly. They were echoes, like shadows from a nearby branch of reality. Here's one of his quotes that really sticks. The divergence between my world line and yours is about 2%. That might not sound like much, but even small differences change big events. Think about that. Just a 2% shift in his timeline. Maybe a vote went the other way. Maybe one leader made a slightly different choice. Maybe one war started earlier. That's all it takes for entire histories to split apart. So when he said there'd be a civil war starting in 2004, raging by 2012, and ending in 2015, in his world, that might have been reality. But in ours, maybe it's still building slowly. Or maybe we dodged it completely. This idea that the future isn't set in stone is both comforting and terrifying. It means if he was telling the truth, that we have some control. We can make choices that lead us away from disaster. But it also means that some things we might think as inevitable might already be playing out in another version of history, just not here. And doesn't that make his story hard to dismiss? Because even if he was wrong on the dates, he could still be right in principle. His world line was just a few degrees off ours. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine I'm riding this motorcycle right now on this highway, If I shift my handlebars just an inch, maybe nothing big changes right away. But miles down the road, that small change puts me in a completely different town. That's what Titor was saying about time. Little divergences at the start create huge differences later. And here's where it gets even spookier. Some researchers who followed Titor's posts noticed how some of his off predictions were actually lining up with the events just later than he claimed, like his warnings about division in America. He pegged it at 2015, but look around 2025. You can feel that tension growing, maybe even stronger than before. Could it be that we're just on a delayed timeline, right down to a slightly different branch of history? Titor himself even said, "Every traveler leaves a small mark, but your world line is your own. It can't be completely predicted." That statement flips the whole story on its head, because it means no matter what he said, we can't just judge him on whether his calendar matched ours. Instead, the mystery is whether his patterns, war, division, surveillance, struggle, are signs that we're heading towards the same destination, just at a different pace. So next time you think about the future, think about this. What if every choice you make right now, every ride you take, every decision, every word splits the path into another timeline? In one version, you're listening to this motovlog on a sunny day. In another, maybe you stayed home, never hit play, and your whole day unfolds differently. That's the kind of reality John Titor said that we're living in. Infinite branches, infinite outcomes. And he just happened to ride in from a nearby branch to warn us about where his world went wrong. So the question is, are we on track to repeat his mistakes, or are we carving a brand new timeline of our own? After March 2001, John Titor just vanished. No more posts, no proof he existed, no social media, no interviews, nothing, just questions. But his words didn't disappear. People kept going back to them every time the world felt tense, divided, or dangerous. And the questions only got deeper. Who was he? Was he real? Some say he was just a prankster, a creative kid or college student who knew enough about computers and physics to write something convincing. Maybe it was a live action sci-fi story posted on internet forums to see if people would believe it. Others have looked at official records, There's the story about a Florida lawyer and his family. Some researchers believe Larry Haber, a lawyer from Florida, or one of his brothers, might have been behind Titor. They had the technical knowledge, and the timing fits. But here's the twist: they've never claimed credit. No books, no interviews, no explanations, just silence. Then there are the people who insist he was real, that he truly came from 2036 and risked everything to leave messages about war, division, and the future of technology. He might have even read our timeline, realized things were a little different, and vanished before anyone could follow him. Here's a quote from one of his posts that still gives me chills. Every traveler leaves a small mark, but your world line is your own. It can't be completely predicted. Even if he was fake, that line feels like he was teasing us, like a ghost rider leaving signs on the road, telling us to pay attention. Some people call him the internet most famous unsolved mystery because the posts were so detailed. Others think he was a warning in disguise, a story to make us think about war, privacy, and the choices we make. And then there's the spooky human part. If he really was a time traveler, think about what that means. Maybe he saw things we haven't even begun to understand. Maybe he glimpsed a future where humanity failed or survived in ways we can't imagine. He risked everything to come back and warn us. Even his disappearance fits the story. Most hoaxes end with attention, books, or fame. Titor didn't ask for anything. He just rode back into his timeline, leaving the world to wonder. And riding out here on my bike in the evening, it's easy to imagine him doing the same thing. Only instead of highways, he's on timelines. Instead of streetlights, he's passing centuries. A lone traveler watching the world, leaving breadcrumbs, hoping someone will notice. It makes you question everything. If he really existed, are we already on the path he warned us about? Or could we still steer onto a new road? And what about all the little things? Every post we make online, every choice we make, could those be the marks he talked about, creating new branches of reality? Even skeptics can't deny the strangeness of it all. The timing, the technical knowledge, the predictions that sorta, kinda echo the world we see today. It's like he left a shadow of the future for us to follow, or maybe just a warning. So as I ride through these empty streets, I can almost picture him, a ghost rider, unseen, moving through time, watching, waiting, hoping we don't crash the timeline. And that's the thing about John Titor. Whether he was real, fake, or somewhere in between, his story lingers. It's a reminder that time isn't fixed, that the future can be strange, and that sometimes the most important messages come from the places you least expect. And maybe, just maybe, we'll catch a glimpse of him again somewhere down the road, or on a forum waiting for someone curious enough to notice. So, who was John Titor? A prank? A prophet? Someone with a story to tell? We may never know, but his words still whisper through today's reality. Maybe his future was never ours, or maybe pieces slipped in unnoticed. You tell me, did John Titor really tap us on the shoulder from the future? Or did he just warn us hard enough we still remember? Thanks for riding this long road with me. Drop your thoughts, real traveler, hoax, or something between timelines. Ride safe, stay curious, and remember, the future may already be watching us.